He wouldn't stop barking, and that was the first sign something wasn't right. The sound cut through the low hum of the station like a blade, sharp and relentless, echoing off steel beams and polished concrete floors that had seen thousands of quiet reunions and silent departures. It was just past 7:10 in the morning, the kind of hour when the light comes in pale and hesitant through tall glass windows, stretching thin across rows of benches and the slow-moving line of returning soldiers stepping off the early train. The air carried the faint scent of diesel and coffee, mixed with the distant tang of rain that hadn't yet fallen, and for a moment, everything felt routine, predictable, safe. Until Rex started barking. He stood rigid near the platform entrance, a full-grown German shepherd with a coat of deep black and tan, muscles coiled beneath his frame, his leash held tight by Officer Daniel Brooks, who had worked K-9 units for over a decade and had never once seen Rex react like this. Not to a suitcase, not to a duffel, not to anything that didn't carry a clear and immediate threat. But this was different. Rex wasn't lunging in aggression, wasn't signaling explosives the way he'd been trained to do with sharp, precise alerts. Instead, he barked again, louder this time, his voice carrying urgency that didn't belong in a place like this, drawing eyes from travelers, from uniformed men stepping down with tired shoulders and quiet eyes, from families waiting just beyond the barrier with hope clutched tightly in their hands. Rex, easy, Brooks muttered under his breath, giving a firm but controlled tug on the leash, his voice low, steady, practiced. But Rex didn't ease. He didn't even look back. His amber eyes were locked onto something ahead, something unmoving, something ordinary enough that no one else had noticed it yet. A bag, just a worn military duffel resting near a bench, the kind that had seen years of travel, its fabric faded and edges softened by time. Beside it stood a man, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in standard fatigues, his boots still dusted with the pale residue of long miles and distant places. Ethan Caldwell didn't move. He stood there as if rooted in place, one hand resting lightly on the strap of the bag, the other hanging at his side, fingers slightly curled like he was holding onto something invisible. His face was calm, almost too calm, but there was something in his eyes, something distant, something that didn't quite match the quiet morning around him. Rex barked again, stepping forward, the leash going taut, his body trembling now not with aggression, but with something harder to define, something deeper, like a signal coming from somewhere beyond training, beyond instinct. Brooks frowned, his grip tightening as he followed the dog's line of sight. "Sir," he called out, voice firm but measured, stepping closer through the thinning crowd. "I'm going to need you to step away from the bag." The words settled into the air, subtle at first, but enough to shift the atmosphere. A few people slowed their pace. A mother pulled her child a little closer. Conversations softened into murmurs. Ethan didn't respond right away. He looked down at the bag, just for a second, then back up, his expression unchanged, but his hand pressed more firmly against the fabric like it meant something more than just a piece of luggage. Rex let out a low sound this time. Not a bark, not a growl, something in between, something almost like a whine, and that was when Brooks felt it, that quiet flicker of doubt that only comes when something doesn't follow the rules you trust. Because Rex never hesitated. Rex never got it wrong. And right now, the dog wasn't acting like he'd found danger. He was acting like he'd found something else entirely. Something alive. Something waiting. And whatever it was inside that bag. The space between them seemed to tighten, not with noise, but with something quieter, something heavier, like the air itself was waiting to see what would happen next. Officer Brooks took another slow step forward, careful, measured, the kind of movement that came from years of trusting patterns and reading situations before they unfolded. But this was not a pattern he recognized. Rex shifted again, his paws scraping lightly against the smooth concrete, his body angled toward the bag with a focus so intense. It felt almost human, his breathing shallow, uneven, as if every second mattered more than it should. "Sir, I need you to step back," Brooks repeated, his tone firmer now, not aggressive, but leaving little room for hesitation. Ethan Caldwell did not argue. He did not raise his voice or make any sudden movement. Instead, he exhaled slowly, a quiet breath that seemed to carry more weight than the words he had yet to say. And for a moment, his eyes flickered, not toward Brooks, but down toward the bag again, like he was listening to something no one else could hear. Around them, the station began to shift. A man in a business suit paused mid-step, his phone still raised to his ear but forgotten. A young couple near the vending machines leaned closer together, whispering under their breath. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn echoed low and long, its sound stretching through the building like a reminder that the world outside this moment was still moving forward. But here, everything slowed. Rex let out another sound, softer this time, almost pleading, and that was when Brooks felt it again, that unsettling pull of uncertainty. This was not fear in the dog. It was not aggression. It was something closer to recognition. "What is in the bag, sir?" Brooks asked, his voice lowering slightly, the edge of command softened by something else, something closer to curiosity or maybe concern. Ethan's jaw tightened, just enough to notice, his fingers pressing into the worn strap of the duffel as if grounding himself. "It is nothing dangerous," he said finally, his voice steady but quiet, the kind of voice that had learned to carry meaning without volume. Brooks held his gaze, searching for something that would confirm or deny what his instincts were telling him. "Then you will not mind if we take a look." The words hung there, simple, reasonable, and yet somehow heavier than they should have been. Ethan did not answer right away. His silence stretched just long enough to make the people nearby shift uncomfortably, to make Brooks adjust his stance, to make Rex step forward again, the leash tightening to its limit. The dog's ears were forward, alert, but his tail was low, not in fear, but in focus, as if every part of him was tuned to whatever lay inside that bag. And then, something changed. It was small, so small most people would have missed it. A faint movement beneath the fabric, barely visible, like the slightest ripple under still water. Rex froze. Completely. The barking stopped as suddenly as it had begun, replaced by a stillness so absolute it felt louder than any sound he had made before. His head tilted slightly, his eyes narrowing, and then came a soft, low whine, drawn from somewhere deep in his chest, a sound that did not belong to training or commands or protocols. It belonged to instinct, to something older. Brooks saw it too, the movement, the shift in the dog. And for the first time since this began, the situation no longer felt like a question of safety alone. It felt like something else was unfolding, something he did not yet understand. "Sir," he said again, more quietly now, "step away from the bag." Ethan closed his eyes for a brief second, as if making a decision he had already known was coming. And when he opened them again, there was no resistance left in his posture, only a quiet kind of resolve. He loosened his grip on the strap, just slightly, enough for the fabric to settle, enough for whatever was inside to shift once more, almost imperceptibly, but not enough to escape the attention of the one creature who had noticed it first. Rex moved forward, slower this time, each step deliberate, controlled, his nose lowering toward the bag, as if approaching something fragile, something that needed more than caution, something that needed understanding. Time seemed to hold its breath as Rex closed the final few feet between himself and the bag, his movements no longer sharp or urgent, but careful, almost reverent, as if he understood that whatever lay inside was not a threat to confront, but something fragile that could be lost with one wrong move. Officer Brooks did not pull the leash this time. He let it slacken just enough, his instincts shifting in quiet alignment with the dog he had trusted through years of patrols and searches, through crowded streets and silent nights, through situations where hesitation could cost more than anyone wanted to admit. But this was not one of those moments. This was something else entirely. Rex lowered his head, his nose hovering just inches from the worn fabric, his breathing steady but deep, drawing in every scent, every trace, every hidden detail that human senses could never fully grasp. And then he stopped, completely still, his ears softened, his posture lowering, the tension leaving his frame not in a release, but in a transformation, as if the purpose that had driven him to bark had now become something quieter, something more certain. A soft sound escaped him again, barely more than a breath, a low whine that carried a weight no command could replicate. Brooks felt it before he understood it, that subtle shift in the atmosphere, the way the crowd behind them seemed to lean in without realizing it, the way the silence deepened rather than broke. "What is going on here?" A voice whispered somewhere in the background, but no one answered, because no one knew. Ethan Caldwell watched it all without moving, his shoulders squared but no longer tense, his hand now resting lightly at his side instead of gripping the strap. There was something in his expression that had changed too, something softer, something that looked almost like relief mixed with a quiet kind of fear, the kind that comes when a secret you have carried too long is about to step into the light. Rex nudged the bag gently with his nose, not enough to shift it far, just enough to confirm what he already seemed to know. The fabric moved. Barely. But it moved again. This time, more clearly. Brooks saw it. His breath caught just slightly, his mind recalibrating, discarding one assumption after another as the reality in front of him refused to fit into any category he had trained for. "Sir," he said, his voice lower now, stripped of authority and replaced with something closer to understanding. "There is something alive in there." The words did not sound like an accusation. They sounded like a realization. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, just long enough for a memory to pass behind them, something distant and heavy, something that did not belong to this station or this morning. When he opened them again, he nodded once. Not in surrender, but in acceptance. "Yes," he said quietly. The single word settled into the space between them, and for a brief second, everything felt still again. Then Rex did something that made Brooks' chest tighten in a way he could not explain. The dog lowered himself slowly to the ground, right beside the bag, his body curved protectively around it, not touching, but close enough to guard, his head resting just inches away as if standing watch over something that mattered. No barking, no growling, just presence, just loyalty, just knowing. The crowd behind them shifted again, whispers growing slightly louder, curiosity overtaking fear, but still no one stepped forward. No one interrupted. Because whatever was happening now, it did not feel like danger. It felt like something sacred. Brooks crouched slowly, keeping his movements calm, deliberate, his eyes flicking between Rex and the bag, then up to Ethan. "I am going to open it," he said, not as a command, but as a courtesy. Ethan did not stop him. He simply nodded again, his gaze fixed on the bag, his breathing steady but heavy, like a man bracing for something he had been carrying for far too long. Brooks reached forward, his fingers brushing the rough zipper, pausing for just a second, as if waiting for something unseen to object. Nothing did. Only Rex's quiet breathing filled the space. And then, slowly, carefully, he began to pull the zipper open, inch by inch, the sound soft but unmistakable, unfolding whatever truth had been hidden inside. The zipper slid open with a soft, deliberate sound that seemed far louder than it should have been, each inch revealing not danger, but something far more fragile, something that shifted the weight of the moment entirely. Officer Brooks pulled the flap back slowly, his movements careful, almost instinctively gentle now, as if he already understood that whatever lay inside did not belong to force or urgency. The first thing he saw was fabric, layers of it, a military jacket folded tightly, wrapped with purpose rather than haste. Then something moved beneath it. Not a sudden motion, not enough to startle, just a faint tremor, like the smallest breath fighting to be heard. Brooks froze, his hand hovering just above the opening, his training telling him to proceed, but something deeper telling him to be careful, to respect whatever this was. Rex did not move. He remained beside the bag, his body still curved protectively, his eyes fixed on the opening, his ears relaxed now, no longer alert for threat, but attentive in a different way, like a guardian watching over something sacred. Brooks slowly folded back the top layer of the jacket, revealing what had been hidden beneath. A small form, curled tightly, barely larger than a pair of hands, its fur a mix of soft brown and black, damp in places, uneven, as if it had not known comfort for some time. A puppy, a German Shepherd puppy, no more than a few months old, lay inside the bag, its body wrapped in the warmth of the jacket, its breathing shallow but present, its tiny chest rising and falling with effort that seemed too great for something so small. For a moment, Brooks said nothing. He simply looked, his mind catching up with what his eyes were seeing, the reality settling in slowly, replacing every assumption he had made just minutes before. Behind him, the murmurs shifted again, confusion replacing fear, questions forming but not yet spoken. "Oh my God," someone whispered softly, the words barely carrying, but enough to ripple through the crowd. Ethan Caldwell stepped forward then, just one step, careful not to startle the dog or the moment, his eyes fixed on the puppy, his expression no longer guarded, but open in a way that revealed more than any explanation could. "He is alive," Brooks said quietly, almost to himself, the statement simple, but carrying a weight that lingered in the air. Rex responded with a soft exhale, lowering his head closer to the edge of the bag, his nose gently brushing the fabric near the puppy, not touching directly, but close enough to feel the warmth, to confirm what he had sensed all along. The puppy stirred again, a faint movement of its head, a small sound escaping it, weak but undeniable, and in that moment, the entire space seemed to shift. Not with noise, not with action, but with understanding. This was not a threat. This was not a violation of protocol that demanded punishment or force. This was something else entirely. Something carried across miles and silence and memory. Brooks looked up at Ethan, his expression softer now, the edge of suspicion gone, replaced with something closer to respect, or maybe quiet disbelief. "You brought him here," he said, not as a question, but as a realization. Ethan nodded slowly, his voice steady but low. "I could not leave him behind." The words hung there, simple, but heavy with meaning that stretched far beyond the station, beyond this moment, into places none of them could fully see. Brooks glanced back down at the puppy, then at Rex, who had not moved from his position, still watching, still present, as if he had known from the very first bark exactly what this moment would become. And for the first time since the barking began, there was no tension left in the air. Only a quiet, steady stillness, the kind that comes when fear gives way to something deeper, something human, something that does not need to be explained to be understood. For a long moment, no one moved, as if the entire station had quietly agreed to give that small, fragile life the space it needed to keep breathing. Officer Brooks shifted his weight slightly, still crouched beside the open bag, his eyes fixed on the puppy as it made another faint movement, its tiny paw twitching against the fabric of the jacket that had carried it across miles of distance and silence. "How long has he been like this?" Brooks asked softly, his voice no longer carrying the authority of an officer, but the careful concern of someone stepping into something far more personal than procedure. Ethan Caldwell knelt down slowly on the other side of the bag, his movements controlled, respectful, as if he were approaching not just the puppy, but the memory tied to it. "Since yesterday morning," he replied, his voice steady, though something beneath it hinted at exhaustion that ran deeper than physical strain. "He was weaker before I got here. I kept him warm. That is all I could do." Brooks nodded slightly, taking in the words, understanding. More with each passing second that this was not recklessness, not defiance, but a choice shaped by something heavier than rules. Rex shifted closer now, his body lowering fully to the ground, his head resting near the edge of the bag, his eyes never leaving the small form inside. There was no tension left in him, no urgency, only a calm presence that seemed to steady the air around them. The puppy let out a faint sound again, barely audible, but enough to draw a quiet breath from someone in the crowd, enough to remind everyone watching that this was still uncertain, still fragile. "We need to get him checked," Brooks said, glancing up briefly before returning his attention to the puppy. "There is a veterinary clinic about 2 miles from here. They can take him in right away." Ethan hesitated for just a moment, not in resistance, but in thought, his gaze fixed on the puppy as if weighing something unseen. Then he nodded. "I will go," he said quietly. Brooks studied him for a second, then shook his head gently. "You are not going alone," he replied, his tone calm, but firm in a different way now, no longer enforcing rules, but offering something else. "We will take you there. It will be faster." Ethan looked at him, really looked this time, as if seeing past the uniform, past the badge, into the intention behind the words. After a brief pause, he gave a small nod of agreement. Rex lifted his head slightly, his ears flicking at the shift in energy, his body ready now, not to react, but to move with purpose. Brooks reached carefully into the bag, his hands slow and deliberate as he adjusted the jacket around the puppy, ensuring it stayed wrapped and supported. The small body stirred again at the touch, a weak but steady sign that life was still holding on. As Brooks lifted the bag gently, cradling it closer to his chest, the crowd parted without needing to be asked, a silent understanding guiding their steps back, their eyes following with a mixture of relief and quiet awe. No one spoke loudly. No one questioned. The tension that had once filled the space had dissolved into something softer, something that did not demand answers, only respect. Ethan rose to his feet, falling into step beside Brooks, his posture still carrying the weight of what he had brought with him, but now shared, no longer carried alone. Rex moved at Brooks' side, his pace steady, his presence constant, as if ensuring that whatever journey this was, it would not be faced without loyalty. And as they began to walk toward the exit, the morning light seemed different somehow, not brighter, not warmer, but clearer, as if something unseen had shifted, allowing a quiet kind of grace to settle into a place that, only moments before, had been filled with suspicion and fear. The station door slid open with a low mechanical hum, and the morning air outside met them with a cool, steady breeze that carried the faint scent of rain and asphalt, a quiet contrast to the tension that had filled the space just minutes before. Officer Brooks adjusted his hold on the bag, keeping it close, careful not to jostle the small life inside. Each step measured as they moved across the curb toward the patrol vehicle parked just 30 feet away. Ethan Caldwell walked beside him in silence, his gaze fixed not on the road ahead, but on the bag, as if every breath the puppy took was something he had to witness to believe. Rex moved slightly ahead now, his posture alert again, but not with urgency, rather with purpose, guiding the path as if he understood that the next few minutes mattered more than anything that had come before. The city was just beginning to wake, the distant sound of traffic building slowly, a delivery truck rumbling past, a bicycle rolling by on the far side of the street, life continuing in its usual rhythm, unaware of the quiet story unfolding at its edge. Brooks opened the back door of the patrol vehicle and carefully set the bag across the seat, adjusting the jacket once more to ensure the puppy remained warm, his hands steady, deliberate, almost protective in a way that had not been there when this began. "We will be there in less than 5 minutes," he said, glancing toward Ethan as he closed the door gently. Ethan nodded, his shoulders rising slightly with a breath he seemed to have been holding since the moment Rex first barked. He moved to the passenger side and paused for a brief second, his hand resting on the door handle, his eyes lowering again, as if something inside him was replaying moments that no one else could see. Brooks noticed it as he stepped into the driver's seat, the way Ethan hesitated, the way his expression shifted, and for the first time, the question that had been forming since the bag was opened finally found its way forward, not as an accusation, but as an attempt to understand. "Where did you find him?" Brooks asked, starting the engine, the soft vibration filling the space between them. Ethan remained quiet for a moment, the city passing slowly through the windshield, the light shifting as clouds moved overhead, casting soft shadows across the street. "About 30 miles outside our last post," he said finally, his voice low, steady, but carrying something heavier now, something that belonged to memory. There was nothing around, just open land and wind. "I thought he was already gone when I saw him." Rex settled in behind the center console, his body angled toward the back seat, his eyes fixed on the bag, his ears flicking at every faint sound that came from within. Brooks kept his eyes on the road, but he listened, the pieces beginning to form in his mind, each word adding weight to the quiet understanding that had replaced suspicion. "But he was not," Brooks said, not as a question, but as a continuation. Ethan shook his head slightly. "No," he replied. He moved. Just a little. Enough. The car rolled through an intersection, the traffic light turning green as if timed to their passage, and for a moment, the world outside seemed to align with the urgency inside the vehicle. "So you brought him back," Brooks said, his tone softer now, more reflective than procedural. Ethan looked down at his hands, then back toward the road ahead, his jaw tightening just enough to show that the answer was more than simple. "He belonged to someone," he said quietly. "One of ours. He used to sit outside his tent every night. Waited there like he had a job to do." Brooks nodded once, understanding settling deeper now, the story no longer just about a dog, but about something carried across distance, across loss, across promises that did not end when everything else did. Rex let out a soft breath, his body relaxing slightly, as if the truth in Ethan's words confirmed what he had already sensed long before anyone else noticed. The vehicle turned onto a quieter street, the sign for the veterinary clinic coming into view just ahead, its small building framed by a row of trees swaying gently in the morning wind. And as they pulled into the parking lot, the engine slowing, the moment felt suspended again, not with tension this time, but with something quieter, something that carried the weight of what had been saved and what still needed to be protected. The vehicle came to a gentle stop, the engine settling into a low idle before Brooks turned the key and let the silence take over, the kind of silence that follows urgency, where every second feels heavier because it matters more. The veterinary clinic stood just ahead, a modest building with white siding and a faded blue sign that read, Willow Creek Animal Care, its windows reflecting the soft gray of the morning sky. A faint chime sounded as Brooks opened his door, the outside air cooler here, quieter, carrying the scent of damp earth and trimmed grass from the small strip of lawn near the entrance. He moved quickly but carefully, opening the back door and lifting the bag with both hands, keeping it level, steady, as if even the slightest shift could change something fragile inside. Ethan stepped out on the other side, closing his door with a soft click, his eyes already fixed on the bag, his pace matching Brooks without needing direction. Rex jumped down last, landing lightly on the pavement, his posture immediately attentive, his gaze locked once again on the bag, as if his role in this was not finished, as if he had been given a task that went beyond detection or command. They moved toward the entrance together, the glass door reflecting their figures as they approached, 3 men and 1 silent guardian, carrying something that did not belong to them alone. The bell above the door chimed softly as Brooks pushed it open, and the warmth inside met them instantly, a subtle shift from the cool morning air, filled with the faint scent of antiseptic and something cleaner, something meant to heal. A woman behind the front desk looked up, her expression shifting from routine attentiveness to immediate concern as she saw the way Brooks held the bag, the way Ethan followed, the way Rex stayed close. "We need help," Brooks said, his voice calm but urgent in a quieter way now, not loud, but clear. "There is a puppy. He is still breathing." The woman did not hesitate. She stepped out from behind the counter, her movements quick but controlled, her eyes scanning the bag as she gestured toward a room just down the hall. "Bring him here," she said, already turning, already preparing. Brooks followed, his steps steady, his grip unwavering, while Ethan stayed close behind, his breathing measured but deeper now, as if every step forward was a step closer to something he could not afford to lose. Rex padded along beside them, his nails clicking softly against the tile floor, his head slightly lowered, his focus unwavering. The room they entered was simple, clean, lit by bright overhead lights that cast no shadows, only clarity. Brooks set the bag gently on the examination table, his hands lingering for just a moment before stepping back, giving space as the veterinarian entered, her white coat brushing softly as she moved with practiced efficiency. She opened the bag carefully, her expression shifting as she saw what lay inside, not surprised, but immediately focused. "He is weak," she said quietly, reaching in to lift the small body with careful hands, supporting it fully, wrapping it in a fresh towel brought in by an assistant who had appeared without being called. The puppy stirred faintly at the contact, its small chest rising with effort, its head moving just enough to show that it was still there, still fighting in its own quiet way. Ethan stepped closer without realizing it, his hands hovering at his sides, unsure whether to reach out or stay back, his eyes locked on the fragile life now placed gently on the table. Rex moved to the foot of the table and sat, his posture calm, his eyes watching, not anxious, not restless, just present, as if he understood that this part did not require action, only faith. The veterinarian worked quickly but gently, checking breathing, adjusting the towel, speaking softly to the assistant in terms that carried urgency, but not panic. Brooks stood near the doorway, watching, his role now shifted completely from authority to witness, his presence steady, his silence respectful. And in that room, under the steady light and quiet focus, the story that began with a bark in a crowded station now rested on something far simpler, something far more powerful, the quiet, fragile line between holding on and letting go, and the people, and one dog, who had chosen to hold on. Time did not stop, but it slowed in a way that made every movement inside that small room feel deliberate, almost sacred, as if even the air understood what was at stake. The veterinarian worked with quiet precision, her hands steady as she adjusted the position of the puppy, wrapping it more securely in the towel, her fingers checking its pulse, its breathing, its temperature, each motion practiced yet deeply attentive. "He is dehydrated," she said softly, her voice calm but focused, "and very weak, but he is still responding." The words carried a fragile kind of hope, not loud enough to promise anything, but strong enough to hold on to. Ethan Caldwell stood just a few feet away, his posture rigid in a way that had nothing to do with discipline and everything to do with restraint, as if stepping closer might somehow change the outcome, as if distance could protect what little control he had left. His eyes never left the small form on the table, watching every breath, every slight movement, as though counting them, as though each one mattered more than the last. Rex remained seated at the foot of the table, his body still, his gaze unwavering, his ears relaxed but attentive, following the rhythm of the room, the quiet exchange between human hands and fragile life. He did not whine. He did not move forward. He simply stayed, present in a way that did not demand attention, but offered something deeper, something steady. Officer Brooks leaned lightly against the doorframe, his arms at his sides, his usual readiness replaced by something quieter, something reflective, his eyes shifting between Ethan and the puppy, understanding settling into him piece by piece, not as information, but as feeling. The assistant returned with a small tray, placing it carefully beside the veterinarian, who nodded once and began preparing what was needed, her voice low as she spoke instructions that carried urgency, without alarm. The room filled with soft sounds, the rustle of fabric, the gentle clink of instruments, the steady rhythm of breathing, all blending into a quiet cadence that held the moment together. The puppy stirred again, slightly more this time, its head shifting weakly beneath the towel, a faint sound escaping it, barely audible, but enough to change everything. Ethan inhaled sharply, the sound small but unmistakable, his hand lifting slightly before he caught himself, letting it fall back to his side, as if unsure whether he had the right to reach out. "He is fighting," the veterinarian said, not looking up, her focus unwavering. "That is a good sign." Rex responded with the smallest movement, his head lowering just a fraction, his eyes softening in a way that mirrored the shift in the room, as if he recognized that the line between uncertainty and hope had just been crossed, even if only slightly. Brooks stepped forward then, just one step, his voice quiet as he spoke, not to interrupt, but to acknowledge what was unfolding. "You carried him all this way," he said, his words directed toward Ethan, but softer than anything he had said before. Ethan nodded once, his gaze still fixed on the table, his voice low, almost distant. "He was not alone," he replied. "Not then. Not now." The meaning settled into the space between them, simple but complete, carrying everything that did not need to be explained. The veterinarian adjusted the towel once more, her hands careful as she ensured the puppy remained supported, her eyes watching for any change, any sign that the fragile balance was holding. And in that quiet room, under steady light and watchful eyes, something shifted again, not dramatically, not suddenly, but enough to be felt. The puppy's breathing steadied, just slightly, its small chest rising with a rhythm that was no longer fading, but holding. Rex closed his eyes for a brief moment, then opened them again, his presence unchanged, his silent vigil continuing, as if he had known from the very beginning that this moment would come, that what had started with a bark would end not in alarm, but in something far more enduring, something that did not need words to be understood. The room remained quiet, but it was no longer the kind of silence filled with uncertainty. It had changed into something steadier, something grounded, like the soft calm that comes after a storm passes and leaves everything clearer than before. The veterinarian stepped back slightly, her hands lowering as she studied the small rise and fall of the puppy's chest, her eyes focused, but no longer tense. "He is stabilizing," she said gently, her voice carrying a quiet certainty that settled into the room like a promise that did not need to be spoken twice. Ethan Caldwell did not move right away. He stood where he was, his shoulders still squared, but the weight they carried had shifted, no longer pressing down in the same way, no longer heavy with doubt. His eyes remained on the puppy, watching as its breathing found a rhythm that was no longer fading, but holding, fragile, but real. Slowly, almost without realizing it, he stepped closer to the table, his hand lifting again, this time not stopping midway. His fingers rested lightly against the edge of the towel, careful, respectful, as if even the smallest touch needed permission. The puppy responded with the faintest movement, its head shifting slightly toward the warmth, a quiet acknowledgement that it was still here, still present, still part of something larger than the moment it had been found. Rex rose from his place at the foot of the table and stepped forward, his movements calm, measured, his presence unchanged but now closer, his head lifting just enough to look at Ethan, then back at the puppy, as if confirming what had already been felt long before it was seen. He did not bark. He did not make a sound. He simply stood there, his body relaxed, his eyes soft, the tension that had once driven him now replaced by something deeper, something that did not need to announce itself. Officer Brooks exhaled quietly, a breath he had not noticed he was holding, his posture easing as he stepped further into the room, no longer standing at the edge, but part of the space that had been created by what they had witnessed together. "Looks like he chose the right people to find him," Brooks said, his voice low, not breaking the moment, but adding to it, his words carrying a quiet respect that had replaced every earlier assumption. Ethan did not look up right away. His gaze remained on the puppy, his hand still resting near it, his voice softer than it had been before. "He was not looking for people," he said. "He was waiting." The words settled into the room, simple, but full of something that could not be measured, something that reached beyond the clinic walls, beyond the station, beyond the miles that had been traveled. The veterinarian nodded slightly, adjusting the towel once more, her movements slower now, less urgent, more assured. "He is not alone anymore," she said quietly. And that was when something shifted again, not in the puppy, not in the room, but in the space between them all. It was subtle, almost invisible, but it was there, a shared understanding that what had begun as a moment of suspicion had become something else entirely, something rooted in trust, in instinct, in the quiet choices that people and animals make without needing to explain why. Rex lowered himself once more beside the table, his body settling into a relaxed posture, his head resting gently against the edge, his eyes half closed, not from fatigue, but from peace, as if his work was done, as if the signal he had followed had led exactly where it was meant to. Ethan remained where he was, his hand still near the small life that now breathed more steadily, his posture no longer guarded, but open in a way that did not need words. And in that quiet room, under steady light and watchful care, the story did not end with a victory or a declaration. It ended with something softer, a breath that continued, a presence that stayed, and the kind of loyalty that does not ask to be understood, only to be trusted.